Upstairs is 90 degrees.
Shall we start? Good morning. This is the Syracuse Landmark Preservation Board of June 20th, 2024. Present at today's meeting,
Nicole Fragnito.
Julia Marshall,
Jeff Romano.
Hillary Donahue.
City Corporation Counsel's Office.
And Kate Auwetter and the preservation planner, staff to the board.
May I have a motion to accept the minutes of May 30th, 2024?
I'll motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor of the minutes as submitted?
Aye.
Any changes to the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? The minutes are adopted. The board will now conduct the public hearing on today's agenda. This is a hearing regarding the potential designation of 727 Comstock Avenue as a protected site. First, the applicant or the applicant's representative will be invited to describe the proposed scope of work and to present any material or documentation regarding the proposal to the board. In this case, the board is functioning as the applicant. I am designating Kate Auwetter, secretary and staff to the board, to present the application on behalf of the board. Next, persons wishing to speak in favor of the proposal will be given the opportunity to address the board. Then persons who wish to speak in opposition will be allowed to address the board. A reminder to any of the members of the public that they have come to speak for or against designation, please keep your comments focused solely on the historical and/or architectural significance or lack thereof of the property and not stray into the potential future plans of the site. Finally, after public comment has been heard, the applicant or representative will be given the opportunity to make closing comments to the board. Following each public hearing, the board may vote to approve with conditions, or deny the application just heard. The board may also decide to hold its decision until the next public hearing. If the hearing is closed, no additional information will be allowed into the record except for the information that the board may request. That information will be available for public review with board staff. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
As you know, I'm Kate Auwetter. I'm staff to the Landmark Preservation Board. So first, I'd like to remind everyone of the intent of the city's preservation program as outlined in the city's zoning ordinance. The city of Syracuse finds, as a matter of public policy, that the preservation and protection of buildings, structures, sites, landscapes, objects, and districts of historic, architectural, cultural, educational, and/or aesthetic merit are public necessities and are in the interests of the health, prosperity, and welfare of the people of the city of Syracuse. So I'm going to start with how we got here, the process. So Syracuse University submitted an application for the demolition of a non-landmark property for review at the May 30th SLPB meeting. The application involves 727 Comstock Avenue, which is on the city's historic properties list. Prior to the May 30th meeting, two groups of SLPB members visited the property and were given the opportunity to view the interior and exterior of the former residence. At the May 30th meeting, the SLPB considered the information provided by Syracuse University and its consultant, Hudson Cultural Services. The board determined that there was sufficient information to warrant a public hearing before making a determination about local protected site designation, which is why we're here today. This case is unusual, although it's not unique, in that the SLPB is functioning as the applicant. As secretary to the board, I prepared the draft designation nomination, leaving some areas blank pending the information gathered at the public hearing and pending the SLPB's determination. I do just want to mention, and you have them, let's see, I've submitted them to you. We have received 19 letters from the public regarding this potential designation. One of them is in opposition to the designation, and 18 are in favor of the designation. So now I'll go over the eligibility criteria. A reminder that this is not a nomination to the National Register. The evaluation criteria that the consultants employ in their analyses lean heavily upon the guidance provided by the National Park Service for the evaluation of properties nominated to the National Register of Historic Places. Though helpful, this guidance does not apply to local designations. The only criteria that apply are found in Article 6.3, Section A3 of the City Zoning Ordinance. According to the ordinance, the SLPB may recommend designation if a property is found to possess one or more of the following characteristics: association with persons or events of historic significance to the city, region, state, or nation, that is illustrative of the historic growth and development of the city, region, state, or nation, method of construction, that illustrates the historic growth and development of the city, region, state, or nation. Number 3 is in the case of structures or sites that may embody distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or representing the work of a master, or possessing unique architectural and artistic qualities, or representing a significant and distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction. In the case of districts possessing a unique overall quality of architectural scale, texture, form, and visual homogeneity, even though certain structures within the district may lack individual distinction. And in the case of interiors, possessing one or more of the characteristics enumerated in the paragraphs above, and in addition, embodying distinctive characteristics of architectural scale, form, and visual homogeneity, which are an integral part of the character of the structure in which the space is contained. Finally, a property must also retain historic integrity, or the ability to convey its significance through its location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and/or association. Based on these criteria, the Syracuse Landmark Preservation Board has designated 4 preservation districts, including 2 residential districts and 2 commercial districts. It has also designated 67 individual protected sites. The individual protected sites include a range of resources, such as parks, cemeteries, commercial, religious, and residential properties. They represent a wide range of associations, include big names and no names, high style to vernacular. They document extraordinary and everyday events and people, each contributing in its own way to the story of the city of Syracuse. Turning to 727 Comstock Avenue. The residence at 727 Comstock Avenue was constructed in 1905 for Charles S. and Laura Curry Estabrook. It was designed by the architecture firm of Gagin & Gagin. After 18 years, the Estabrooks sold the house to Zeta Psi Fraternity. The residence was used as a fraternity house until 2022, when Syracuse University purchased the property. It's currently vacant. Now I'll go through the eligibility criteria, starting with the historic context. So this is related to eligibility criterion number 2, illustrative of historic growth and development of the city. The late 1800s and early 1900s saw the rapid expansion of neighborhoods of Syracuse located east of downtown. The growth was made possible in part with the advent of an extensive streetcar network that allowed people to move away from their downtown workplaces. The first streetcar to the east side was established in the late 1870s along East Genesee Street. By the early 1900s, streetcars ran along Euclid Avenue from Westcott Street to University Place with direct connections back to downtown. Starting in the 1870s, affluent members of the professional classes began purchasing and building homes on the city's east side. For example, the wealthy enclave of Walnut Park, located just north and west of Syracuse University, was developed between 1870 and 1900. The early 1900s saw steady development along Comstock Avenue, including several large homes. Advertisements appeared frequently in local newspapers offering choice lots along Comstock Ave. The residence at 727 Comstock Ave was constructed in 1905 for Charles and Laura Estabrook. They selected the local firm of Gagin & Gagin Architects to design the house on this location, and the location, as one news article stated at the time, was considered about the best available residential property in that part of the city, commanding as it does a fine view of the university campus, the city, lake, and country beyond. The Estabrooks thought well enough of this area that in 1910, Estabrook built a house at 819 Comstock Avenue for his mother and stepfather, Theron and Caroline Sears Estabrook Barnum. This home was designed by Ward Wellington Ward. Beginning in the 1920s and 1930s, the advent of the automobile and introduction of new technologies changed where people could live and how people lived in their homes. Large mansions that required multiple live-in servants were no longer practical or economical. As people began to leave the city for the suburbs and exurbs, the city's mansion rows, such as along James Street and West Onondaga Street, declined and transitioned from single-family homes to multifamily, and many were demolished. Although demolitions were limited, the same transition was true in the University Hill neighborhood. As families moved away, many of the large houses around Walnut Park and along Comstock Avenue were sold, in this case, to sororities and fraternities that converted the homes to dormitory-style living. The east side of the 700 block of Comstock Avenue now forms an informal fraternity row, visible from the north and south of the block. In 1923, the Estabrooks sold 727 Comstock Avenue to the Zeta Psi fraternity and moved to a new house designed by Ward Wellington Ward in Fayetteville, New York. The house at 727 Comstock Avenue became one of several Greek-affiliated properties along the 700 block of Comstock. The residence was owned by the fraternity until 2022, when Syracuse University purchased the property. Now I'll go into the ownership history. This is related to Criterion 1, which is the associations with persons or events of historic significance to the city, region, state, or nation. Charles Scott Estabrook was born in June of 1879 in Binghamton, New York. He was the oldest of two sons of Dr. Charles Guder Estabrook and Caroline Miranda Sears. He graduated from Cornell University in 1900 with a law degree and was admitted to the New York bar within a year. After graduation, Estabrook established a private law practice in Syracuse. In 1904, he went into partnership with his brother, William Sears Estabrook, operating the firm Estabrook and Estabrook. The firm continued to grow as they took on new partners. In 1920, William Harding joined the firm, which became then Estabrook and Harding. The firm evolved later into Estabrook, Burns, Hancock and White, then Hancock, Estabrook, Ryan, Shove and Hurst. The law firm of Hancock and Estabrook continues to bear the Estabrook name and maintains a headquarters in downtown Syracuse today. In addition to his busy law practice, Mr. Estabrook was equally active in the community. He was elected to the Board of Counselors of the Syracuse Home Association in 1913 and served as the president of the board from 1929 to 1952. He was a member of the board of directors of the Syracuse Trust Company and the successor to that, the Marine Midland Trust Company, and served as their attorney. His other board work include terms as a member and vice president of the board of the Post Standard Company, and he was also a trustee of the Oakwood Cemetery. He served as president on the board of the University Hospital of the Good Shepherd and was on the board of the Syracuse Foundation. His professional associations were as a member of the Onondaga County Bar Association, the New York Bar Association, and the American Bar Association. For a time, he served also as a commissioner of deeds. On September 6, 1905, Estabrook married Laura J. Curry, the daughter of Henry M. and Harriet G. Curry of Pittsburgh, at the Curry's summer home in Massachusetts. Laura's father was in the steel industry in Pittsburgh and was associated with Andrew Carnegie. Like many women of her time and social class, Laura Estabrook was active in the social and charitable activities of the city. Her name appears frequently in the newspapers, recounting her participation in or as hostess of teas, luncheons, receptions, dinners, and other social activities. She was one of the founding members of the Rummage Shop, which was a charitable organization, the Girl Scouts, the Visiting Nurse Association, and Community Chest. She was a member of the auxiliary of the University Hospital of the Good Shepherd for over 50 years and served on its board of directors for about 25 years. She and her husband were members of the Onondaga Golf and Country Club. The family were members of St. Paul's Episcopal Church, where Mr. Estabrook had served as a vestryman and warden. The Estabrooks' first and only home in Syracuse was the residence at 727 Comstock Avenue. On July 9, 1905, the Syracuse Herald announced that Charles Estabrook had purchased a lot from James Gilbert on Comstock Ave to build a fine colonial home for him and his new wife. The family lived in the house for 18 years. During this time, their family grew to 4 children. Census information also indicates that they had 3 live-in servants, a cook, maid, and nurse for the children. In 1923, the Estabrooks sold their home on Comstock Avenue to Zeta Psi Fraternity and relocated to the new home in Fayetteville. The Zeta Psi Fraternity that purchased the house was founded at New York University in 1847. The Gamma chapter was founded by 7 charter members at Syracuse University in 1875. It was originally located at 805 University Ave. In intervening years, it was located in other areas near campus and at 8 Cross Avenue before moving to Comstock Avenue. An article in the Syracuse Journal in August of 1922 recorded that Zeta Psi Fraternity was considering the purchase of the Estabrook House at 727 Comstock Ave as their new chapter house and expected the purchase deal to be closed within a week. The article described the house as one of the finest in the Hill, and it could be converted into a home for fraternity use without alteration. The grounds were described as spacious, and that with the conversion of the Estabrook House, there would be the grounds were described as spacious, and that with the conversion of the Estabrook House into fraternity, there would be 4 fraternity houses in that section of Comstock Ave. The fraternity purchased it for $43,000, and in October of 23, they held an open house at their new location for other fraternities and sororities at the university. Although the fraternity went through periods when it was inactive at the university, once it acquired 727 Comstock Ave, it maintained its ownership. After the national chapter closed the fraternity in spring 2007, it continued to lease the property to other Greek organizations until it was purchased by Syracuse University in 2022. Architectural significance, and this is related to eligibility criterion 3. The residence at 727 Comstock Avenue was the design of local architecture firm Gagin & Gagin. In July 9th, 1905, the Syracuse Herald article announced a new development and noted that the house will be a pure colonial in style, 3 stories high, a frame surmounting a white granite foundation. A July 1905 article in the Post-Standard identified Gagin & Gagin as the architects, J.W. Dawson as the mason, and Thomas Kuhn as the carpenter for the project. A September 1905 article in the Post-Standard noted a striking feature of the exterior of the house is the large number of dormer windows. These windows were built at a mill and set in place in one piece. Gagin & Gagin was founded in 1902 by brothers Thomas Walker Gagin Sr. and Edwin Hall Gagin. Both Gagins were graduates of Syracuse University's architecture program. After studying abroad at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, France, for 2 years, Edwin Gagin returned to Syracuse to join the Faculty of Architecture at SU. Thomas Walker Gagin completed his graduate studies in architecture at Columbia University before returning to Syracuse to open the architectural firm with his brother. Over the almost 30-year history of the firm, Gagin & Gagin won a number of notable commissions, including the L.C. Smith Tower in Seattle, which was the city's first skyscraper. Local commercial and institutional designs of note include Lyman Smith Hall on Syracuse University campus, which was built between 1900 and 1902, Machinery Hall on Syracuse University campus, 1907, the Kraus-Heinz Factory, the Masonic Temple, building at 318 Montgomery Street, which is downtown still, and St. Joseph's Hospital. The firm had multiple residential commissions as well, including a number in Norwich, New York, for the Eden family. Local commissions include 401 University Place, which is the former Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity house on Syracuse University, 703 Walnut Ave, the former Horace Wilkinson House, and 973 James Street, the Chapin House. The firm favored colonial revival and neoclassical high-style residential designs. The house at 727 Comstock Avenue is no exception, featuring a symmetrical center hall design, tall hipped roof with pedimented dormers and projecting roof front portico. Elaborate decorative details include the full-height fluted pilasters with Corinthian capitals located on each corner of the main block of the house, carved modillions under the protecting eaves of the main roof and porches and side bay window, and the highly detailed pedimented front entrance. I'm now going to talk just briefly about integrity. As noted before, according to the Preservation Ordinance, to be determined eligible for designation, a property must also retain historic integrity, or the ability to convey its significance through its location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and/or association. As the consultant's reports have extensively detailed, the property at 727 Comstock has lost significant material integrity with the introduction of vinyl siding, loss of original windows and doors, replacement porch columns, and other features. The large rear addition and fire stair on the north facade have also impacted the design qualities of the original structure. In addition, its historic setting has been altered to the west due to the encroachment of the university institutional structures, and to the east by the recent demolition of the residential block that faced Ostrom Ave. Despite these losses, the property retains its integrity of location, feeling, and association. The property is unmistakably an early 20th century high-style colonial revival mansion whose site was intentionally selected at the highest point of Comstock Ave. Elements of its original workmanship remain, including the surviving elaborate decorative exterior details and the notable carved roof dormers, all of which speak to the intention of the designers and the pretensions of the original occupants. That concludes my report, and if the board has any questions or additional comments that they'd like to add at this point.
Thank you. Does board members have additional comments or questions or clarifications from Kate? The only thing I'd like to add is I believe Goldstein Alumni and Faculty Center was also designed in 1903 by Gagin and Gagin. I would add that to the list.
I was going to ask, Kate, great job. Where were you able to find the list of structures? Was that on a public domain search?
Yeah, that was the list of structures by Gagin and Gagin. Yeah, that was on a. Actually, it's referenced in your in the packet. It was on a website, an architectural inventory. I think I'd have to look in the. Thank you, Sam. University of Washington.
University of Washington. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other clarifications needed? Okay. I'd like to ask those wishing to speak in favor to come forward and state your name and address. Okay. You have 6 minutes to speak. Please come forward if you'd like to speak in favor of the designation. Please state your name and address for record.
Sam Gruber, 123 Clark Street, Syracuse. I am presently co-president of the Westcott Neighborhood Association, also president of the Arts and Crafts Society of Central New York, past president of the Preservation Association of Central New York, but I'm speaking on my own behalf, not on behalf of those organizations, because there has not been discussion or decision about this issue. Thank you for that exemplary presentation. Much of what I would have said is included there, so I'll try not to repeat much. I don't think I'll need the full 6 minutes. I'm also going to submit some general comments about development and planning in the area since particularly the 1990s and the building of the life science centers on Comstock and University, which don't pertain particularly to the application for protected status, but I think generally speak to the continuing changes in that neighborhood, which eventually will affect the decision of the city, no matter what decision this board takes, about whether to allow demolition to proceed or not. It gives a historical perspective. So after considerable and careful thought on this, I suppose if I had heard Kate's presentation, I would have had even more to think about. I am going to speak in support of the designation of the Charles and Laura Estabrook House as a Syracuse protected site. And I want to emphasize that Laura was undeniably a partner in this project, and I suspect it was mostly her family money that actually helped pay for the house on the occasion of their marriage in 1905. So when we call it the Estabrook House or the Charles Estabrook House, we should say it's the Charles and Laura Estabrook House and give credit where credit is due. It was built, as we've heard, in 1905 on one of the finest lots on the rapidly developing East Side. And despite its present neglected appearance, it's easy to see that the building exemplifies the highest standards of domestic architecture of the time. And when built, it was one of the purest examples of the still new colonial revival style. In its location, architecture, and architectural detailing, it was designed by the young and wealthy Estabrooks to be seen and admired, and the house therefore qualifies for protected status for several reasons, which I will state, and I think Kate's presentation gives more detail and rationale for this. It was the home for almost 2 decades of Charles Estabrook, one of Syracuse's prominent lawyers, who with his wife, Laura Curry Estabrook, were cultural and social leaders in the city. Charles was already a successful young lawyer, but we can imagine that some of the money for the house, as was customary at the time, would have come from Laura's wealthy family. The house was designed as a major private commission by Syracuse University-affiliated architects and later nationally known Gagin & Gagin as they entered the mature and most impactful period of their long career. The house exemplifies a period of Syracuse's urban architectural, residential, and cultural growth to the northeast and is literally a high point in that movement. This block was not included in the proposed University Westcott Historic District, National Register Historic District, not local, not because of its lack of history, but because its historic development is different from the blocks to the east that were more dependent on that streetcar culture that Kate described. This block of Comstock is the southernmost expression of the upscale development that is apparent at Walnut Park, but is now interrupted since the building of Byrd Library and the west side of Comstock Avenue. At the same time, 1905, it points the way to the next phase of upscale development on the east side, the creation in 1911 of the more inward-looking Berkeley Park Garden suburb just a few years later. The quality of the architecture and craftsmanship of the house, though subsequently moderately altered, was extremely high. And I would also add a detail that Kate did not mention. If you can look closely at the dormers, the pediments of the dormers, they have these inscribed reverse volutes, very unusual and totally unnecessary. But remarkably intact. I should also note that unlike some other structures which I may mention, this has dormers on multiple sides of the window showing the size of the house, whereas normally the few other examples from this period, generally a few years later than this one, only have dormers on the front. So this was a much more substantial structure. It still is. So it is one of just a handful of the best examples of pure colonial revival style from before the First World War, after which the form became more common but simpler and generic. And here I'll also interject, if one does a newspaper search for the word colonial around this time, you will find it used rather permissively, but usually never to describe buildings like this. So buildings on Allen Street from around 1900 are frequently called colonial. Today we would call them more Victorian or Edwardian or Queen Anne because they're a mix, but just because they would have a Palladian window, the newspapers or the critics would call it colonial because the style was still being defined in these years. There are only a handful of comparable houses on the east side, and these include 317 Clarendon, which is a little later, about 1912, by
1 minute warning.
Gagin and Gagin's colleague Clarence Congdon, a smaller building on 636 Allen Street, and then a few others in the city like 904 Carbon Street on the north side. Okay, let me speak to the role of Estabrook in the arts and crafts movement. It's already been mentioned that he was an early patron of Ward Wellington Ward. I actually suspect there was a connection even going back to Laura Curry's family in Magnolia, New York, where Ward worked, but Estabrook was the lawyer for the Moyers, and Ward was married to Maud Moyer, Harvey Moyer's daughter, and from an early date, he was a patron of Ward's career, and as we saw, he commissioned the house from Ward for his mother and stepfather just down the street.
Sam, I'm sorry,
up.
time is up.
I have written remarks which I'll submit. I don't know if that's allowed, actually.
Okay.
All right, let me just mention, we've already heard about the accomplishments of Gagin, and yes, I want to mention that as the Estabrooks could look from their house in 1905 across the university to the west, to the hills, and to the lake, was a spectacular view, they would see 3 recently completed Gagin buildings, Lyman Hall, Machinery Hall, and the recently completed Delta Kappa Epsilon building, which the university has beautifully restored and is the Goldstein Alumni and Faculty Center, where I've eaten lunch many times. They were both university alumni, and they both subsequently studied in Paris. Edward had been a professor in 1897 to 1902. Thomas taught at the university from 1895 to 1901. And their work embodied the teachings, practices, and aesthetics of the university's growing architectural program at the end of the 19th and early 20th century. They were part of a group of young architects who were changing Syracuse, replacing the grand old men like Horatio Nelson White and Archimedes Russell, who designed the front row of buildings of Krauss College, Hall of Languages, Tolley, which was the Von Ranke Library, that faced north. So this row of residential houses that was being built on Comstock was a kind of a pendant to that already existing row, but it was residential and private, and it overlooked the university to the west and east to the city. At the same time, almost the same time, Hallenbeck and Ravel, that is the year after this house was built, introduced their master plan for Syracuse University, 1906, and subsequently a number of buildings that are on the quad were erected. And these, like the colonial revival of the Estabrook House, embody the Renaissance and classical spirit, which was at the core of Syracuse's teaching at the time, inherited from the Beaux-Arts education of all of these architects who I've mentioned. I think that's enough. It really is an overlooked house because it's set back and because Comstock is very busy, and it lost the context of the excellent buildings that were torn down in the early 90s across the street. At that time, Syracuse said they weren't going to go east. That's another issue. But the building is intact and could be restored and protected from a practical standpoint. I'm not sure if it's practical from an economic and say, development standpoint, but that's not the issue that's before us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the extra time.
State your name
Thanks,
and
Sam.
address, please.
My name is Don Hughes, and I live at 157 Strong Avenue in the Westcott neighborhood, about 3/4 of a mile from this house. And I've been in that neighborhood for 38 years. And I'd like to speak in support of designating the Charles and Laura deference to Sam, Estabrook House, I happen to have with me this. So I am not an architect. I don't have historical expertise to lend. I am an engineer. I walked around the house, and it seems to be in pretty good shape. The foundation seems solid. Vinyl siding can be torn off and replaced. I just want to speak in favor of preservation. We have lost so many structures in Syracuse. Particularly painful to me was 1100 East Genesee, which is the site of the current Ronald McDonald House. And that was completely unnecessary to tear that down. That could have been repurposed and have the structure Ronald McDonald House put behind it. So this building is historic. It stands in a row of historic structures. I would be in favor of designating the entire strip as an historic district, and it sounds like that could have happened except for some historical architectural differences or developmental differences. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Are there others who would like to speak in favor? If not, I'd like to ask those wishing to speak in opposition to come forward and state your name and address, and you will be given 6 minutes.
Or against, I think it's more just comments, but we'll see, I guess. Dominic Cicerelli, 281 Wainwright Ave. So a couple things, just listening to everybody that I put down here. Spot zoning, it wasn't talked about, but spot zoning refers to when a piece of property or groups of property have special zoning laws applied to them that differ from the zoning laws surrounding them. The practice of spot zoning can be very controversial and may be illegal. So just, I don't know if that pertains to this, but okay. But the other question I had is, do you think this is going to open up Pandora's box? Because now, do you think a smaller group or individual would get maybe the same outcome or treatment like Syracuse University? Obviously, with the assumption, you know, that's when typically people see big business or deep pockets come in, sometimes decisions are persuaded that way. So just some thoughts and concerns, I guess, to bring up. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Those who would like to speak in opposition?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's you. Presuming that you're opposed. Yeah, okay.
Hello, Jennifer Bybee, Assistant Director for Campus Planning, the Syracuse University Campus Planning Office located at 1320 Jamesville Ave in Syracuse. I'm going to first introduce the other members of our team. And so here to my right is Beth Selig, who is President and Principal Investigator with Hudson Cultural Services. To my left, in the third row, is Gary Cole, who is here today as a historic preservation independent consulting expert. In the second row and to my left is Greg Fauché, environmental and land use attorney with Whiteman, Osterman, and Hanna. I want to read into the record that our team has submitted 5 documents total in support of our position that the building does not meet the local criteria for designation. And those would be, number 1, the city application itself, 2, Gary Cole's outline of his presentation today, which you'll hear shortly, 3, an April 2024 building assessment report prepared by Hudson Cultural Services. 2 more documents prepared and submitted by Hudson Cultural Services. A June 2024 document responding to comments from the May 30th, 2024 Landmark Preservation Board meeting, and also a June 2024 document correcting aspects of the city's draft designation report. Our team has done an exhaustive amount of research, as documented in the materials we've submitted to date, and also which you're about to hear more about. The university maintains that 727 Comstock does not meet the Syracuse zoning ordinance criteria for local designation as outlined in section 6.3A3A. Further, and critically, consistent with Syracuse zoning section 6.3A3B, the building now lacks historic integrity, and for that reason should not be locally designated. I'm going to turn the presentation in a moment to Gary, but in terms of general preservation, I do want to reiterate my comments at the May 30th meeting that the university is a stalwart supporter of historic preservation and has poured enormous resources into preserving local properties when they are deemed worthy of preservation. Thank you. I'm going to now turn the presentation to Gary.
Thank you, everyone.
Please, could you state your name and address for the record?
Gary Cole, 4444 West Lake Street, Suite 1700, Chicago, 60606. So a couple of things real quick. My voice isn't what it normally is due to allergies this time of year, so if I don't speak loud enough, please let me know. The other thing is, on my way here, I had one of those things happen that you dread ever happening and you think it never will. My computer crashed, and that had my notes and for today. So I've been scrambling to reconstruct it. So I hope you'll indulge me if I pause occasionally to make sure I can read my own handwriting. Okay. I think I got the major points on this. As Jen said, I'm here today as a historic preservation consultant, expert consultant. My background, though, is I am both an historic preservation architect and an historic preservation attorney. I sometimes simply do work as a consultant instead of an architect or an attorney. I'm not providing architecture or legal services, just consulting services. So that's why I'm here today. But you will glean, I think, through my writing and my testimony today that I draw on both backgrounds to come to an understanding. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in architecture, and in master's it's in historic preservation from University of Illinois. After I finished my grad work there, I got invited to work at the Illinois SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, which I did for 2 years, and one of the best jobs I ever had. Didn't pay so well, but I got paid to drive up and down the state of Illinois and look into old buildings. I come from a family of historians, so that was baked into me from an early age. And so I worked for the SHPO for a couple of years and, on a huge range of capabilities, including the National Register and various tax projects. But anyway, so that, and I also went back and taught at the University of Illinois in their grad school of architecture in the preservation option. And one of the things I taught, well, I taught a variety of things, but one of them was forensics, teaching students how to investigate buildings for their condition, for the most part. I still have those skills and hopefully influenced a few people along the way, and hopefully they have them too. But I have a, bear with me if you would, please. I have a preservation philosophy that sort of sums up a lot of my work. I believe that preservation laws and administrative procedures should be expressed in clear, transparent, and reasonable, and in a reasonable application of the various national, state, and local laws, and in a language accessible to everyone, regardless of their academic or professional credentials, or sometimes I jokingly call it, preservation for the people, right? Everybody should be able to understand it. And I mention this background so that I can speak to you peer-to-peer as preservation advocates, which I have been for 30 years, and I continue to be, despite the fact that I'm standing up here testifying about tearing down a building. It's, to me, a dispassionate application of the applicable laws. So there are two things I want to talk about. Before I do that, I'll preface it by saying, as you know, you are a certified local government. CLG is the acronym that I'll use. Very popular program. The preservation laws I describe sometimes as a regulatory octopus, with the head being the National Park Service, 50-plus arms being the SHPOs, and I know there's only 50 states, but they have some in territories as well. So, and then each one of those tentacles, a large number of CLGs, and I think it's actually a great trickle-down kind of regulatory exercise because the Park Service is setting the guidelines including the National Register, and then that gets trickled down all the way to the CLGs. And the CLGs, as you know, they have some, I'm not sure if you've been one since '86 here, so I'm not sure if anybody here worked on that, but, there was a partnership of some kind with the SHPO to develop your ordinance, and then maybe that's still ongoing. And then that went on to the Park Service, who ratified it, of course. And the key takeaway on that, because it's a lot of things, but the key takeaway on that is that local landmarking activities typically mirror those of the National Register. The criteria, a little bit of variance depending, because it's a big country and we have a lot of diversity in buildings. And so the criteria itself can vary a little bit, and I've seen as many as 7 or 8 on them, I've seen as few as 4, just depends. But what is consistent in all of them is the National Register's methodology for evaluating properties for as a potential landmark. And specifically what I'm talking about is something that I'll get to here in a little bit, but it's called, the acronym I use is CSI, Criteria, Significance, and Integrity. And so for every criteria, you have to apply these things, some more than others. Obviously, criteria 3 leans more heavily on integrity. But so some of the thing I'm going to talk about here in a minute is I want to distinguish, but also show the similarities between the CLG and the National Register process. The process, they're very, very similar. Bear with me.
I just want to let you know you have 15 seconds. So
Oh, I didn't know it was on time.
can someone see their time?
I'm sorry.
No, that is not correct. You're speaking in opposition to the application. My understanding is that you spoke with someone in the administration and they advised you that you would have 6 minutes. Other members of your team who have signed up to speak can yield their time to Mr. Cole if you wish. And you didn't use your whole time. No, you are not the applicant.
That's what you said to me.
I don't recollect that, but we can be flexible if you want, but how long do you think you're going to?
Well, I've just sort of warmed up here. I have to get to the 2 points that I wanted to talk about. I mean, try me another 6 minutes, but I'll have to skip over this, and then if...
No, don't skip anything. If your recollection from our conversation is that I said maybe 2 minutes, Gabe, then I'm not going to place you in the first one, then Julia, if you're okay with that, because I don't recollect, but I'm not going to.
The only comment I'll make is that Mr. Gerber spoke in favor, and we limited him to which, and
He can come back up if he has more to say.
Okay, well, thank you. I've spoken. That's very generous. I've spoken in front of commissions where they bring the stage hook out after 3 minutes, and appreciate you. I will try to. I will try to speed through these while still hitting the points. Anyway, laying the foundation there on what it means to be a CLG in terms of the landmarking activities. And I fully understand that you're not nominating this property for the National Register, but what I'm focusing on is that you are nominating it as appear to be anyway, pursuing, not sure exactly whether you are going to see it through based on some of the things I read in the application, but my position is that the process is still the same, whether it's National Register. The end designation is different. But let me get to that in a second. There are 2 points I want to talk about here. One is that based on everything I reviewed, there are some inconsistencies between the SHPO's determination of eligibility for this property, and while that might not matter, determination of eligibility for the National Register. So while that might not matter, it does seem also that that determination of eligibility has been substantially relied on in Phase 3, and then the city's, I guess, list of protected sites says that it is eligible, determined by the SHPO. But there are some things when you go through the documents on this, and as you know, a National Register nomination is extensive, and it's like a graduate thesis in a lot of cases. And I, in my review of things on the CRIS website, the SHPO's CRIS website, there were some oddities that I think should cause pause for the city to. Well, I'm just going to talk about them. In April 2021, it was the SHPO on their CRIS website listed it as maybe potentially National Register eligible. A year later, with no intervening additional evidence that I could find anyway, it was upgraded to is eligible. Now, that's a huge leap. Potentially is down here. You drive by a building, you look at it. No, not there. From that kind of distance, you say, yeah, potentially. And it's happened. To say something is eligible requires extensive amount of physical and historical research and writing, photography, sometimes some forensics investigation. But I didn't see any of that, none of that. There was no additional evidence. There were the same photos, I think, were the same, and the data fields were empty. Data fields in terms of information about various aspects of the building, the parties, the builder, the materials, that kind of thing. So I guess my question would be, and I'm rhetorically asking it here, is what happened? How did this get a promotion without any of this intervening prove-up? Well, I don't have an answer for it, but I have seen it now used extensively. So again, being a certified local government, and my question would be, again, rhetorical here, would be whether the city would even be pursuing this as a, I'm going to call it a local landmark. That's the vernacular I'm around. If the SHPO had determined it ineligible, or if it was still just possibly potentially eligible, maybe you would. But this inconsistencies, I think, if it is a foundation on which the local efforts are somewhat based, or partially based, or entirely based, I think that those, I think that there are some issues there in terms of documentation. So there is just a few of that criteria. Sorry. I'm going to read something I'm sure you all know very well. But back to this uncertain and inconsistent appearing upgrade in this building's historic designation. I'm looking at the criteria 3, this is on your application. And it is, as you would expect and hope, that it was not a clone, but a variation of the National Register's criteria 3 for architecture as well. And there are a few points in here that I really want to stress, and this is whenever I do the kind of analysis. I mean, I focus heavily on so I'll just read it. In the case of structures, buildings, embodying distinctive characteristics. Distinctive is a high bar. Characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or representing the work of a master, or possessing unique architectural and artistic qualities, or representing a significant and distinguishable entities whose component may lack individual distinctions. These are very high bars, and each one of these, when I analyze something, I look to see, does it embody distinctive characteristics? What does that mean in its historic context, of course? Is it the work of a master? That almost never happens. Master's a pretty high bar, too. Or I come from the land of Frank Lloyd Wright, so it's not that uncommon, you know. Or possessing unique architectural or artistic qualities. Now, unique in there does mean what it sounds like, and this is important that plain meaning of the language is used. It is not something arcane. Unique means what it means, and you can name any of the synonyms go along with that and as replacements for that. But they all have to provide a unique, whether it has a unique architectural, or whether it represents a significant distinguishable entity. So anyway, those are very high bars, and so again, I go back to if this is based somewhat on the SHPO's determination of eligibility for the National Register, and the National Register criteria and methodology basically being the same as it is here at the local level, then it would give me pause. So that is one of the concerns I have on this. The other part of this is back to my CSI analogy, acronym. So for each of these talk about criteria, and that this depends on the criteria. You have to have a significance under that, and I know I'm telling you things you know, but you have to have significance for however it is being nominated. So if it's criteria 3, then the terms that I just read are they lay out the some of the significance factors. So nominated under 3, then how do you evaluate significance for that? Well, that language, the plain meaning of it, gives you some guidance, and then a lot of other research and frankly, good thinking and writing. The last one, and I'm focusing on only one aspect of integrity here. I know there's several of them, but in this case, I'm focusing on the physical integrity, and just making sure applying the integrity. So, as you know, you nominate something under a criteria. It has to have the integrity to convey it. It has to have significance and then the integrity to convey that significance. Very often what happens is a building may have started out its life as a terrific building, but over the years, it's simply entropy and human interaction, which is kind of the same thing, degrade it. And I'm going to put on my forensics hat. I'm trying to skip over here a little bit. I think I'm still hitting the points. So oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but you can't take his time, and he didn't interrupt you when you were speaking, so please allow him to speak. Sorry, carry on.
Okay, thank you. I want to talk about the last subject that I have here today that directly affects the building itself. I had a boss at the SHPO who had a good term. He said, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a site visit is worth 1,000 pictures. And I did hundreds and hundreds of site visits, and there simply you cannot underestimate the value of that. So putting on my forensics hat, we walked around the property, and I was looking for original materials, the condition of the original materials, were those covered up, what was there. And I have to say, it's one of the unfortunate things in this building's history is that it seems to be a victim of deferred maintenance and bad judgment. And the vinyl siding, there is a tendency, I think, for some people to believe that if you simply remove the siding, you have a new building. Very often, the reason the siding was put there to begin with is because there was already deterioration and they wanted to cover it up, because they didn't want to spend the money on repairing it. What also happens, especially on buildings with some of the details, like the Corinthian capitals up there on the corner pilaster, what happens is that flashing cannot fit tightly in that, and in time it allows water paths to go through there. And what I noted was there's an extensive amount of water deterioration, water-caused deterioration throughout it. And there's an old test you do to find out if wood is stable or not. Stick it with an awl, see how sharp instrument, see how far it goes in. We didn't have an awl, so we stuck it with a key, and it went in through it. And this is the sheet. I think it was the sheathing behind the clapboard. But where clapboard was pulled away, there was damage. There was damage everywhere. The window jambs had been cut in the past, and I want to just sort of say that this is a nice picture from a distance, but it's not really the metric. You have to get up close. And as I used to tell my students, start with the general and work your way to the specific. So if you went through that, and on the outside, anyway, you would probably come to the same conclusion I am that I did, but that the building is substantially compromised, its integrity, and even pulling that vinyl off, there would be not just clapboard replacement, but probably whatever was behind the clapboard, because it's been taking water for a long, long time. So it is my opinion that the building does not meet the integrity requirement of a nomination. So those were the 2 points. Addressing the issue of the SHPO's determination of eligibility, which I don't think, if it was done based on what I've seen, there isn't enough evidence to bump it up to an eligible from a determined eligible based on what I've seen. Maybe they have big files, in the back room or something they've never uploaded. I don't know. But the second one then is that this fails both the significance and the integrity test in criteria 3, and therefore I don't think it should be locally landmarked. Thank you very much for your patience and your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do you have, don't cut yourself short if you have anything else you want to add, if you need a minute, because I know you lost your laptop, which is like the biggest nightmare ever, or it crashed, so. I'm sorry, I was just saying that because he lost his laptop crashed, that if he has anything else he'd like to add, take a minute to review his notes so that he can make sure he's made all the points that he was preparing to make today.
Well, I think I've hit all the takeaways, and I
Okay.
think you know where I'm coming from on it.
Just want to make sure.
I would, again, just reiterate that this view is a good distance, and it looks a whole lot better at this distance than it does when you get up close to it. That's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Beth Seelig, Hudson Cultural Services. I'm just going to start off by saying I also was under the impression that we were not having a time limit. I am going to try and sort of skip around and hit the main points of my presentation to sort of try and keep it as short as possible. Hudson Cultural Services has offices located in LaGrange, Dutchess County, New York.
I think we've thrown away the time limit thing, so if anyone who spoke in favor, we have to give everybody the same amount of time, so if anyone who spoke in favor wishes to come back up after, they may do so, and you can make your presentation.
I'll still try to be quick.
Okay.
Everyone has a morning. Like Mr. Cole, I have been working in the field of historic preservation for quite some time. I have worked on many, many building projects, and I have found that it is important to focus on the highest quality and the most distinctive buildings for preservation and landmarking, rather than those where the necessity of time, environment, or nature, or even redevelopment practices has pushed forward this process of landmarking. I also want to, right from the beginning here, verbally amend some of the statements that exist in the written documents that were submitted. The descriptions of the building that are in those documents were based on my site visit of April 2024, at which point all the siding was still intact, all of the windows are wrapped in aluminum metal flashing, and so the statements about those materials not being visible were accurate at the time I was there in April. I was there at the property yesterday, and obviously sections of the vinyl siding have been removed, and some of that aluminum flashing has also been removed from around the windows. In the locations where the vinyl siding has been removed, it's clear to see a styrofoam underlay that has been nailed or fastened to the original clapboard material. That clapboard is falling off the building where it's exposed. It's just falling because, as Mr. Cole pointed out, the underlying boards have completely dry rotted through. You know, the keys went all the way in. There was no resistance. It's very, very soft. Where the aluminum flashing has been removed around the windows, the trim is deteriorated, it's rotting, it's missing in places. So it's quite apparent that there was a reason that was all covered over in the first place. I want to just touch on some points that Mr. Cole mentioned about criteria, integrity, and significance. As you can see here on this slide, we've done a rendering for you that shows with the gray shading all of the areas where in April of 24, the original materials or the historic materials were not visible. Those that are shown in white are locations where we can still see some of the original trim and woodwork. As we'll see on a later slide, there is a large, no, don't change it, don't change it. But we'll see that there is a big addition on the east side of the house which obscures that particular elevation. I will also add and reiterate that while the building is covered in vinyl siding, we can only determine integrity based on what's visible. We can't make an assumption that there's clapboard underneath everything. There may be, and as Mr. Cole pointed out, it may not be in a particularly good condition. The exterior doors at all of the egress points are modern replacements. We have modern vinyl inserts throughout the majority of the exterior that not only do not match the historic design of the house, they also don't even match in size. There's lots of wood trim infill around the framing to make whatever size was available for purchase fit. Exceptions to the windows would include the leaded glass libraries that are in the interior, the leaded glass windows in the interior of the library, and then there's a colored glass pane in the basement, but neither one of these are visible from the exterior. The support columns that are on the portico porch and the side porch, the former veranda, have been changed. They were originally rounded and smooth with capitals. They are now squared and fluted with no capitals. So obviously a modern replacement and a change from the original material. The modillions are present underneath the roof line, and you can see that white line going just underneath the asphalt roof. Those appear to be original, but the balance of the entablature has been removed or completely covered over with the vinyl siding. The porch that's on the north elevation was formerly a very nice veranda. It was reconstructed, and it is much smaller. It's evident that when they put the roof on or did repairs to the roof, they were done poorly because water has filtered in and that roof is rotting through on the underside. There's a light fixture, and it's just collapsing in on itself from the rot and the condition. As mentioned, there's a fire escape ladder on that northern elevation, which does alter the character of that feature. That fire escape also cuts into the roof line, and it caused the conversion of a dormer window into a doorway. There's also metal gates that have been nailed and fastened to the dormers all along the roof line to prevent roof access. The windows, the roofing material, and the siding of the dormers are all modern materials. As mentioned, the broken scrolled pediments are still there. They're still intact. During my visit yesterday, I noticed that a large portion of these dormers, these pediments have rotted out, and that there are areas where it has been patched with various types of flashing, whether it's aluminum or plastic. It's hard to know without climbing up there and taking a look. If we could go to the next slide. And this one, I just want to point out that that's the addition that's on that eastern elevation, and you can see that it obscures the area below the roof line. If we could go to the next one, please. We can see a side view. It's hard to get a good side photo because of the trees on that side of the house, but this one shows that the box bay window, we have the original pilasters and some of the trim and details under the cornice line. When I was at the site yesterday, those capitals are rotted through, and in spots they've actually replaced or tried to patch with that spray foam, you know, the good stuff that you buy at Home Depot, and you could see that they sprayed it in and then tried to paint it over. And then if we could go to the next slide. Here we have a side-by-side comparison of a historic photo of the building. We don't have a date on it, but it is presumably from the time when the Esterbrooks lived in the house. And we can see in the photo that it is clearly, when they lived there, it was a very high style. There's lots of architectural details. But when we compare it to the house that's there now, we can see that a lot of those stylistic details have all been removed. Specifically, the balustrades on top of the porch roofs. The columns, we can see here that the columns on the veranda and the porch have also been changed. The awnings obviously have been removed. That very decorative entablature around the roof line has also been removed. The widow's walk on the top of the roof has also been removed from the building. The windows in the dormers, you can see on the historic photo that they're very nice 6/6 double hung windows, and they have been replaced with modern windows that do not even match the same style. The current roofing material is asphalt shingle. We don't know what the original roofing material was. It's possible it was slate, like some of the houses further south on the block, but it has been replaced with modern asphalt shingles, and that snow guard has been removed. While it's clear that a few features of the original style do remain, they are not sufficient to detract from this overall loss of integrity. To be considered a historic property using either the National Register guidance or the guidance in the zoning ordinance, a building must display enough distinctive elements and original materials to characterize the design and to convey its historic significance. It's important to note that when we consider historic integrity, we can only go by what is visible. We cannot assume or presume that something is buried underneath that may contribute to its integrity, and the building must display enough distinctive elements and original materials to characterize its historic design and convey that historic significance. I'm going to, just following Mr. Cole's CSI lead, just briefly touch base on some of the criteria. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly because most of it's in the written documents. But association with persons of historic significance. Under the National Register guidance, and while it may not be the same guidance that the board uses, but as Mr. Cole pointed out, as a CLG, that is the guidance that guides historic preservation. To be considered significant, the contributions of the individual to history must be identifiable and documented, and the property must be associated with the person's productive life, reflecting the period in which he or she achieved that significance. We do not consider the building at 727 Comstock significant under this criteria because Charles Esterbrook's work as a business attorney is not considered a significant contribution. A search through the case laws via Google Scholar does not yield any findings for Mr. Esterbrook. Regardless of his success as an attorney, the property today no longer reflects the characteristics of a upper middle class, high-styled, single-family residence with a landscaped yard that would have represented Mr. Esterbrook's period of occupation. We could go to the next slide. I'm going to touch base on the criteria 2, which is illustrative of historic growth. And for those who may not be involved in historic preservation all their lives, historic contexts are the historical patterns that can be identified through the consideration of the history of the property and the history of the surrounding area. On the slide, we can see on the left the 1910 historic Sanborn fire insurance map. And right next to it is a recent 2022 aerial image, and the red boxes delineate the current boundaries of the tax lot at 727 Comstock. In 1910, when the Esterbrookes lived there, that lot was substantially larger. It extended east to Ostrom Avenue, and it had a very large area or lawn area to the north. There is a garage located behind the house. It's labeled on this map as an auto house. In the aerial image to the right, we can see the extent to which the yard has been subdivided. The eastern extent would have had, and did have in previous years, houses that fronted on Ostrom Avenue. That northern portion of the lot was subdivided, and in 1981, an additional frat house was built there. And currently, that whole north and east side of the yard has been covered in asphalt. And if we could go to the next slide. And this is an overlay of both of those images. And we can see the extent to which the neighborhood has changed since the time that the Esterbrookes lived there. The buildings to the west, on the western side of Comstock, in 1910, they varied in purpose and function, from service buildings to community buildings to dwellings, and they have all been demolished. To the south in the 19th century, buildings have been removed, and later mid-20th century buildings have been added. There are a number of modern intrusions along this block. Any historic setting that may have existed in the vicinity of 727 Comstock Avenue through the mid-century mark has been completely compromised by late 20th and 21st century changes. As mentioned, and as we've talked about a bit, this was Esterbrook's private residence. It does not seem to be correlated to any of the growth of the surrounding economic or transportation trends within the city of Syracuse. In fact, as the city continued to grow in the early 20th century, the Esterbrookes relocated from this urban setting to a more remote and country setting in Fayetteville. Just moving on to criteria 3, I'm going to just try and peruse my notes to get through this fairly quickly. As the board notes, and as Kate made it presented in her discussion before, the building was constructed by Gagin and Gagin. They were an architectural designer, and they did both commercial and residential buildings. As we saw on the previous comparative photo, the building no longer reflects the details and the high style of that original design. And as we've mentioned, and I'll reiterate, to be historically significant, a property must retain enough of those characteristics to be considered a true representation of the type. I'm not going to reiterate the disrepair and the loss of integrity. I think we've covered that fairly well. And then I just want to talk a little bit about significance, the S in our CSI, and correct a couple of things for the record. that may have been misleading or omitted from the draft application document. Where it is visible, this clapboard siding that we're focused on has rotted or fallen off. It's unknown, as I mentioned, of whether or not it's underneath the original vinyl, the current vinyl siding, and where the vinyl siding has been removed, we do see that it has been patched. The draft application does not discuss or make any mention of the condition of the remaining or visible architectural details. There's no mention of the modern materials replacing elements of the dormers or the porches. The application also focuses on some interior details, which it's my understanding are not being considered. But I'll just mention that the original hardwood floor on the first floor has all been covered over due to damage. There's actually a replacement floor through there. The interior features numerous modern materials used in bathroom spaces and with portions and with subdivisions on the second and third floors. The interior also features drop ceilings, which cover damaged utilities and broken or bisected original ceilings. The interior balustrade includes all of the spindles on that are all replacement spindles. There are no mentions in that draft application about the extensive modifications to the eastern wall based on the addition and the changes to the northeastern corner of the original structure. There's no mention of the fact that while there are remaining architectural details around the access points, those doorways and entryways have all been replaced with modern material, and the original side lights to that main entrance have been removed. And I will reiterate Mr. Cole's point that when we walked through the building, we noted severe water damage throughout. There's mold and dry rot in the ceilings, there's mold in the basement, there's water in the basement. When repairs were done in the basement, they put wallboard or sheetrock on the ceiling that is now saturated from moisture that's coming into the building. So there are some significant concerns with the condition of the structure. These conditions were documented back in 2012 in a house and property condition assessment, which I included in my submission. The documentation in 2012 included the city fire marshal and city building inspectors, and it shows that in the early 2010s, the building was in a state of disrepair and dilapidation and in a truly horrid condition due to the abuse and neglect by the occupants and the poor maintenance and repair methods that had been implemented. As evident by our walkthroughs and our site visits, repairs have been made. However, there's no indication of how they were made. And based on what I saw yesterday versus what I saw in April, a lot of the damage was simply covered up. But nevertheless, the repairs that were made were made using modern materials, which has further diminished the historic fabric of the building, the historic character of the building, and has further diminished its historic integrity.
Any, ask if anyone. Sam, do you want to have additional comments since your time was cut off?
Thanks for those presentations and for that work. I wouldn't contest, sorry.
Yeah, his remarks shouldn't be in the form of rebuttal to SU's presentation.
If you have something
No,
Just
it's not a
if you had
rebuttal,
something to
but
add
it's
to
things that
your
I didn't mention because I thought they weren't relevant to the application for protected site status based on the known criteria, but have been brought up. So it's not a rebuttal, but I'll add these two remarks. We are not nominating this for the National Register of Historic Places. This is a local designation, and despite some perceptions that the two types of designations are identical, they are not, and the criteria are different, as you well know, because you've been serving on this board for many, many years, and you've been involved in this process for many, many years. And even with the National Register nominations, integrity is not always the prime consideration. I know this because I've put many buildings on the National Register, And integrity, while it is described, is not always the determinant. This just brings up some difficult questions about the role of preservation in a developing city. And I think these deserve discussion in a different arena. But I do want to say that a couple of these questions impact things mentioned. Context, for instance. Yes, the context has changed in the last half century, and that's because the university has demolished all the areas around it. Maybe they'll demolish this too. Maybe it should be demolished. We have to recognize still that it is historic. We have to document it, perhaps do a HABS report on it. We can't let it go gently into this night. It is an important structure with important history in Syracuse, and it can't just be bulldozed. We did this with the Babcock-Shattuck house many years ago when the bulldozers were on the site, and we saved it. But that was a house that was sold for only $35,000. This has been sold for more than $3 million, and the economics are totally different. But we can't just see it vanish without note, because that's what's happened to a lot of the buildings around it. I think the city does better now in protecting its past than it did in the 1990s, and we can't repeat the processes of the 1990s now. So the context has changed, but the original context was important in the city's growth, and that was the point that I was trying to make. And integrity, you've all restored many buildings in your lives, so you know what can be done and what can't be done. Money is usually the main issue, not the quality of the clapboards or something like that.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure. Please don't, please don't use this time to rebut the university's presentation. If you want to add to your comments in the vein of what you're speaking about before, but we're only affording this opportunity to people who spoke in favor of the designation because we eliminated the time limits due to a misunderstanding between me and SU. So you can augment your comments, but please don't position them as a rebuttal to SU's comments. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say that the condition of the building is, of course, has changed over time. The thing is over 120 years old, so it has been upgraded and changed to fit modern codes, fire escapes, and so forth. There's speculation about what is underneath vinyl siding and so forth. There's which I didn't get into much detail about, but the building has a lot of merit. There is structural value. There's a grand staircase inside. There's stained glass. The features. The picture's not up anymore, but the dormers are significant, and I think it's worthy of preservation. Thank you.
Do you have closing? Would you like to?
Yeah, you can do it.
Okay.
Hello, I'd like to address the comment about documentation and indicate as the owner's representative that the university would be willing to document the still existing features. And I did ask Beth if she had to say estimate what percentage of the building that's left that is original and that perhaps still has some significance. She said it's difficult to tell, of course, but probably maybe about 10%. But the university would be willing to document that as part of the demolition. Thank you.
Board members, do you have any questions, clarifications before I close the meeting, the public hearing? You're closing the public comment, not the hearing. Right. Public comments. Do you have any questions before we have discussion of our applicant? And I'd like to address the board when you're ready. No? Lori? No? Okay. Public comment. The hearing is presentation comment. Do you have comment? I do want to address the board. I want to
just ask you a couple questions. I normally don't, but I want to make sure you received all of the documents sent by SU to the board members. I think Jennifer mentioned that there were 5 documents. We have a couple of them in front of us. And I want to make sure that you received all of the public comments that was sent into the
I'm
board.
just saying, I believe this is the only document that was not sent to you directly. This is the presentation from today.
Correct. Okay. So I just want to confirm.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just explained to the board that the presentation document was the only document that they did not receive from me via SU, or sorry, from SU via me.
It's distributed today. I just want to confirm with the board that you received all of the documents submitted by SU, including the handout from today for that outline Ms. Selig's presentation. Secondly, I'd like to have you keep in mind the legislative intent while you deliberate and discuss the criteria among yourselves. Keep in mind the legislative intent in Article 6, Section 6.1 of the Historic Preservation section of rezone. But most importantly, I want to read out to you, and normally I don't do this, but I want to make sure that in assessing the 5 criteria, which are the only criteria relevant to your determination per the code, the review and decision of the Landmark Preservation Board in Section 6.2F has a section on hearing, review, and decision. So I'll read the salient aspects, but of course you should be aware of all of the A through F. The Landmark Preservation Board shall consider the application relevant supporting materials, which is why I just asked, staff assessment, which is your application presented by the Secretary to the Board, Ms. Owater, and any evidence and public comments from the public hearing. The Preservation Board shall render a decision on the application based on the applicable approval criteria listed in the application-specific procedures. Those are the 5 criteria you find in Section 6.3A, sub 3, lowercase a, 1 through 5. Those are your applicable approval criteria in the application-specific procedures. Just for the record, if the review involves a public hearing, which we're doing, the recommendation or decision as applicable shall be based only on the record of the public hearing, shall be in writing, and shall include findings of fact based on competent material and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. I want to point out that the submittals of SU are part of the record for this hearing, even though some of them came by email prior to the hearing. They are a part of the record for the hearing, including what you received today and the public comments. Your decision shall reflect the determination, shall include findings of fact based on competent material and substantial evidence presented at the hearing, shall reflect the determination of contested facts, and shall state how the findings support compliance with the applicable review standards. The board shall clearly state the factors considered in making its recommendation or decision, as well as the basis or rationale for the recommendation or decision. Unless otherwise provided in this article, any representation made by the property owner or their agent or in submitted materials during the public hearing shall be binding as conditions of approval. And I'll just point you to, I don't know if you have it in front of you, your review criteria that are found at 6.3A, 3A, 1 through 5. Does everybody have them in front of them? Okay, so.
Yes.
Public comment is closed, Mr. Fauché? Yes, they are part of the consideration. The criteria, yes, that's correct. And also note that under A, the property, structure, object, landscape, site, or district must be found to possess one or more of the following. It doesn't have to possess all of 1 through 5, but at least one. And Mr. Fauché is 100% correct that B, C, D, E, and F should also inform your decision. And before you start your deliberations, again, this is a little different than we normally do it, but I'd like the board to review all of section 6.3A quickly. I know you're familiar with it, but I'd like you to review it again before you start.
Everybody have a copy?
If you don't have a copy, you can have mine.
Do you have a copy?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll just give you a minute.
6.3A?
A plus B through F.
Yes, correct.
One minute, okay. Music. Is everybody ready? Have you had sufficient time to go back over the section? A couple more minutes? Okay. Okay. Sure. Can you just come up to the microphone, Mr. Fauché, and introduce
Application
yourself?
indicates that only items 1 through 3 of 6.3A
She
are
only,
being considered. Those are the only ones that were Xed. We did not address either 4 or 5 because it was not part of the application. It'd be
Yes, that's
patently
correct.
unfair for this board to consider those criteria as part of this application when it's not part of the application.
could you just state your name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. Greg Fauché,
And your
Albany,
address?
New York, attorney Whiteman, Osserman, and Hanna.
You're absolutely correct. As you're aware, the application only highlighted criteria 1, 3, 1, 2, and 3. I think 1, 3, 1, 2, and 3. So those are the ones you're considering. 4 and 5 are not
Applicable.
in play.
Correct.
Correct. I think that was understood.
Yes, I think you did too, but.
Okay. Public comments are closed. The board will now deliberate in terms of comments, and I will ask each of you to make comments. Please be specific, as we were, specific comments based on the criteria. Hillary, would you like to start?
Yep. Thank you all for coming today and for the presentations we heard on both sides. I would like. Yep. Okay. I guess each of us will go through 1 through 3. 1, association with persons or events of historic significance to the city, region, or nation. I think we heard in the comments and in the documents prepared by Kate for the board. This is definitely associated with someone who has historic significance to the city, Charles and Laura Esterbrook. I think we can see from the original newspaper articles that were highlighted, this was a very significant house attached to people that were had a lot to do in a lot of areas involved in the city of Syracuse. Number 2, illustrative historic growth and development of the city and the region, state, or nation. Again, we had a lot of discussion about how this was built as a private residence, and then at some point in its history, this strip of the city became fraternities and sororities when the private residence was to, when there was a shift from these private residences out to the suburbs. Okay, number 3, in the case of structures or sites embodying distinctive characteristics of a type, I think we've seen, you can see it, this, as soon as you put an image of this house on the screen, the dormers jump out, the form of the house is still there, the form of the porches, everything is there. All right, this is not good. All right, I'm going to stick to the dormers for now, but when you look at the house, you can see that it was a significant house when it was built. The dormers on each side of the roof are still there, the chimneys. There's a lot still conveying the importance of the structure. So I think it does meet 1 through 3, in my opinion.
Are we able to bring up that photo of the historic image offset with the shadowed out image that was provided by CHS? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I will be last.
Thank you. So looking at, can you hear me okay? Looking at criterion, looking at 1 through 3, that's what we're here to look at today and review. As Hillary just illustrated, association with persons, yes, it was early on in his career, as we have learned, in the prime of his life, settled here, chose this site as professionals had done, moving out of city center, moving up to the hills, overlooking Syracuse University and the growing community that was developing along its perimeter. Esther Brooks built the house. We know it's Gaggin and Gaggin. We've heard all this information that has been spoken to at this point. So number 1, association with persons, events, historic significance. Yes. 2, illustrative historic growth and development of the city, state, or nation. Again, this is a representative of professionals moving out of downtown and heading up to the hill. Association with Syracuse University, the illustrative growth that happened, as again was alluded to with development of Walnut Park and surrounding streets, Comstock Avenue. Again, being a choice location as referenced in the 1905 newspaper articles, references this growth and this prosperity that was showcased in the city of Syracuse. Case of structures and sites embodying distinctive characteristics. If we look at the general massing of these 2 images, to me, this retains much distinctive quality of the design and intent from 1905. As Hillary mentioned, the dormers are mentioned in the 1905 article, which picks out as a distinctive feature of this property. Yes, we have lost detail of a widow's walk and a balustrade, but over 120 years, we do lose features. The distinct massing and size and spatial relation of the facade to the historic image is extant, including with Gaggin and Gaggin as our known architect, our known mason, and our known carpenter. We have just filled in representing work of a master possessing unique architectural and artistic qualities that was spoken to as a pure colonial style of architecture. So to me, 1, 2, and 3 are exemplary and on exhibit and display here on this property.
Thank you.
I echo my colleagues' comments regarding criterion 1 and 2, as well as 3. I'd like to also point out in relation to criterion 2 that this house is illustrative of the growth of the city, but on an even more localized level, the development of Syracuse University, and is both functionally and visually recognizable as part of Greek life at Syracuse University for generations of alumni. It is part of the legacy of the culture of student life on campus, and that has played an immense role in the development of Syracuse University, which I think should not be understated. In relation to criterion 3, I'd also like to comment that as an alumna of Syracuse University, simply walking by this house, it is evident that it was and still is a stately residence. The workmanship is still evident in the detailing, especially the dormers and other elements that my colleagues have noted. And that despite the alterations that have taken place over time, it is still visually apparent that this residence still maintains a level of integrity that adequately and comprehensively conveys its historical significance, not only to generations of alumni, but also to the broader growth of the city of Syracuse.
I will make some comments on each of the criteria that we're considering. Association with a person of historic significance. Charles Estabrook moved into this house in 1905 when he was 26 years old and resided in this home for 18 years, which is a significant, in my opinion, amount of time where he crafted his career as an attorney, well-known attorney in Syracuse, and till this day, Hancock and Estabrook, 135 years old. So to me, in my opinion, that is a significant person that resided at this home prior to moving to Fayetteville. Current day, yes, Mr. Estabrook is well known for the estate, the Conservancy in Fayetteville, but his significant part of his career for 18 years, he resided in this home. Criteria 2, illustrative historic growth of the city, embodying distinctive characteristics. It is illustrative of the historic growth in terms of the history of Syracuse and the history of vehicular transportation outside the center part of the city. The growth of the Walnut Historic Park area was prior to the construction of this building, so it began there in terms of people moving out of the city and building mansions, as it was quoted in the newspaper articles, that it was one of the most costliest buildings, residential buildings built in Syracuse at that time. In the case of the structure embodying distinctive characteristics, and a lot of the conversation here has been in terms of the loss of many of the features which one would expect over 120 years. One thing that has not been mentioned is the fact that the character of the building still remains. The massing and the siding on the hill still remains, and is evident today that you understand the massing of the building and the particular features that are there. Distinctive dormers on all four sides. And I'd like also to speak to master and the definition of master. We're not looking for national distinction here. We're looking as a locally protected site. And Gagin and Gagin were local masters. They designed several university buildings that are actively used today. Smith Lyman Hall, or Lyman Smith Hall, Machinery Hall, Goldstein Alumni Faculty Center, and this is a piece of their portfolio of residential work. So in that regard, I do consider it the work of a local master. And those are my comments. If there are any other comments from the board.
Can I have a clarification?
Yeah, I want to clarify also. I may have, in keeping with Mr. Fauchet's comments, I want to make sure that you address the individual criteria, but also the other components of 6.3A3. If you've already done so, that's fine. If not, I just want to remind you that especially B and C are relevant to this designation. Should you vote
Well,
to do it?
criteria 4, I don't believe applies.
Correct.
I'm talking about B, after number 5, B and C.
Sure.
I don't believe the other ones apply. You're not looking at the interior. This isn't designating a district, and I don't know if this,
I think we addressed.
yeah, if
B.
you did, I just want to make sure that
Okay.
I didn't mislead you as counsel into not addressing all the criteria
I
that are.
think we addressed
necessary.
B in terms of the characteristics that were noted above in terms of historic integrity.
To be able to convey.
As far as C is concerned, the principal structure and the exterior building components and site features, I believe, as well as the topography of the site. I could mention, because it was discussed in terms of the growth, if one would look at it from the old maps, the datum line of the siting of all the residential buildings was respected along the street in terms of sitting far back on the lot. So that's one of the site features that could be considered from item C.
Yeah, I'd say that accentuates the site, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
I don't believe
or the siting of the house, I should say.
D is not applicable because we are not considering the interior of the property.
Right.
E is not applicable because it is not a designation of a preservation district.
Correct.
And F, properties that have achieved significance within the past 50 years, and it's well over 50 years old. Other comments? You were asking for a clarification?
I was going right there to B and C to make sure that we included those. So I'm settled on that.
May I have a motion? If there are no other comments for this application, may I remind you that if you make a motion, you need to be very specific about which criteria apply.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the local protected site designation of 727 Comstock Ave on the basis of criterion 1, 2, and 3. Section 6.3, subsection 3A, criterion 1, 2, and 3.
Is there a second? to the
I'll
motion?
second that.
Any discussion or modifications to the motion?
No?
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any in opposition? Any abstentions? The resolution passes.
Good job.
Another section?
Certificate of appropriateness, 945 Comstock. Just give us a minute to get ready. Thanks, Kate. I think so. We're close enough. We can share if we need to.
Yeah, we can share. This is a certificate of appropriateness.
He's come back.
We're gonna, right, he's coming back,
We're
so
gonna
it's all
vote.
business for vote.
So this is old business, because you closed the public hearing. So, but the board did hold, this is application CA 24-10. It is a certificate of appropriateness, 945 Comstock Avenue, the construction of a new garage in the Berkeley Park Preservation District. The board closed the public hearing at the last meeting, but held it open pending consideration of relocation of the garage to protect the mature trees located in the rear yard. I just would like to mention that Jeff Romano and I met with Paul Williams on site on June 12th to review a revised site for the garage, and this is the outcome of those conversations.
Good morning. My name is Paul Williams. I'm here to represent 945 Comstock, this garage proposal. As mentioned by Kate, I met with Kate and Jeff at the site, and according to, I guess, Jeff's concern about the tree root situation, this was the alternate, only other seemingly decent location for the garage. And when I spoke with Uzomo, the owner, this is the one that she chose. So we're off the back property line, about 12 feet, aligning it roughly with the porch. The side yard obviously is much larger. As far as like the site coverage factors, we're way under. I don't have the numbers readily available, but I think we're well under 30%. Are there any other? The one other issue that came up was we were all admiring the red Japanese maple and decided we would try to save that by relocating it to another part of the site with a tree spade, and we'll try to do that. So.
If I could go ahead. So, meeting on site, I greatly appreciated your time and respect for what was on site. Initially, if you guys remember, we were looking at just adjusting the garage in a southwesterly direction when it was located closer to the back property line. On site, through conversation, Paul had brought up maybe moving the garage where he's got it proposed right now. So going back and looking at the conversation, trying to stay away from the large, mature cherry, black cherry, and oak. This is the concept that was developed based off of our conversations. And in doing so, we've been able to save the two large specimens. And as Paul just noted, there's a very nice example of red Japanese maple that we spoke about picking up and moving closer to the property line to save the species, save the tree, but also accentuate what's there and not lose any additional tree cover. So just reviewing this, I just got the site plan, but this looks good to me for setback. You've just as you stated, you've kind of maintained the line from the side sun porch as your back line, so it keeps it forward, respects that the neighbor. The driveway is a little longer, but it's still narrow at the street, and then it widens out. And then that space that's created between the house and the garage now becomes a nice courtyard space that's usable, and then it protects the remaining of the backyard. So kudos to you on this plan. You listen to it, you listen to our issues, and I think you've really drawn up a great resolution on this.
Thank you.
Just one point, we would just like to ensure that the back portion that says yard, where the trees are protected, doesn't become parking down the road.
Correct.
Where the trees are?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a large open space at this point connected to the driveway.
And the materials have not changed in terms of what you presented at the last meeting in terms of materials of the garage?
Correct.
So we need if everything is set, then we'll need a motion. Yeah.
So the garage is still the same shingles, same door style,
Right.
same size, nothing's changed, just the location.
And the 12 feet, 9 inches off the property line, and that aligns with the side porch?
Correct.
Pretty close, yeah.
And the side yard requirement in the city?
The side yard is 4 foot there.
Just wanted in record.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Do I have a motion? If there is no other comment?
I'll make a motion to approve as submitted.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Any opposition? No. Abstentions? No? Pass it.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Appreciate the patience on that. Good project.
Looks better with grades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's a really great conversation.
State your name for the record.
Morning.
Oh,
My name is Bob Abbott, architect.
Bob, hold on.
Yeah.
Take one and pass it.
All right, just quickly, so this is a minor site plan review, 308 West Genesee Street. It's the renovation of this for new commercial use. The building is eligible for the National Register. The board's role is to comment on the application. It was held over from the last meeting, giving Bob and his team and the owner the opportunity to remove more of the metal paneling around the building there between the first and second stories to see what was going on underneath, and then to be able to respond and make recommendations about how to treat that space, that void. So, please.
Okay. I'm Bob Abbott, architect. Carmen Sesta, the owner. Last time we had a little different design because we didn't know what was underneath the panels. And since then, Carmen removed the panels around the whole building, and a lot of you were down there to view what we had. And indeed, what I had originally proposed was incorrect because there were some spaces in between the existing terracotta panels that were never terracotta. They were always meant to be an area for a signboard, which is evident in probably the photographs you have of the building from many years ago. So the existing terracotta panels that we found did not have any curvature to them, as the point, the corner, the curved point, did have curved tops to it, but the rest of it was squared off. So those panels do have some damage to them, and various types of fasteners were there at one time, and we thought it's evident we should keep what's there exposed. It should be cleaned. Areas where there's damage should be grinded out and re-cemented to match the existing terracotta that's there. That's our proposal. And the areas where there was nothing but the old signboard areas, I'm not sure how good the backup panel that's there right now. But again, if it's solid and we can reuse it, we will. But we still would like to go over it with the drive-it system without using the insulation board. I'd like to go over it with cement board. It's a hardier material, and you can still put the base coat with a mesh and the final coat, which would be a sand finish, and get it as close to looking to the tiles than any other product that we could use. And it's very hardy. It'll be up there for many, many, many years. And then I had to bend Carmen's arm a little bit, but we thought we'd abandon the box signs that are there, those metal signs. I never liked them from the beginning. Yeah. And I said, let's go with individual black letters in those designated areas. But we're not here for that now for the signs. We're just for the material itself and what it's going to be. And then when it comes time to address for the building permit, and then we'll go in for the sign permit and show what's appropriate at that point. That's it. Now, one more thing. On the North Franklin Street side, which is the short side, I would like to continue with the drive-it system in those pilasters that are there. And there's 3 of them that have heads on them, but they don't have a continuation. I don't know why, but I'd like to replicate those pilasters on that side to match the entire rest of the building, and I think it would be very appropriate.
You mean the West Genesee Street side?
The North Franklin Street side, the short side of the building.
Short side.
Which is right across from the pizza.
The east side.
The east side.
The east side of the building.
Yeah, east elevation.
What is that, North Franklin Street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yes,
That's
it
the side. Because that
Okay, I'm just reading
He's
your.
thinking the other end.
Okay.
I'm just reading your drawing, and they're there.
I think there was a garage door there at one time when it was a dealership.
Yeah, there's the image of the bricked-in wall.
Yeah, and that brick
or
was
that's there now.
That brick, we had the picture. It was an original building there, and they kept that building. They built the rest of the building around that, which was very odd.
Yeah, it's unique.
We have the documentation where.
Do you see the original building that was Brazil Chevy?
Yes.
Sign on there? And that's what we uncovered. When we took those panels down, that brown brick from that building is there. Now, how much of the building they actually kept, or I know they kept part of that facade. So again, to leave that brick, it looks doesn't look like it's in keeping with the rest of the building.
Can I just show this to Hillary too? So this facade, you want to go over it with?
Yeah, if you look at the...
Not a drive it, but you wanted to go over it with?
Or, well, a ephes material without insulation. Is that correct? Statement?
I have to.
Yeah, if you look at the elevation drawing of the North Franklin Street side, you'll see that area where the brick is covered, and I think it looks very appropriate to the rest of the building, what we've laid out there.
Yeah. Your infill.
Yeah, and we're going to go over that. Brick will be the base, and we'll go over that.
And so then what you're showing, you're going to apply a style to replicate the window styles?
Yes, yeah.
Just as a fill, but that'll just
Right.
be.
It didn't say it'll be the drive-it, but it'll have some relief. It'll
Then
have
just painted.
It'll have a finished coat that'll match the color of the terracotta.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is, based on this elevation, you have it up there. So, can you?
Sorry, I can help.
Up and down.
Up and down.
I can help.
Oh, nope.
Yes.
Okay, this is where all that brick is going to cover through here, and then this would be redone and drive it, sort of lines up with, this is sort of kind of up here, we're lining that up with that.
I guess that's my question is, I don't know if I would agree. It's monolithic, it was monolithic as brick, and you're dividing it now all into 3 to match the upper, and I don't know if that's.
Well, there's a lot of verticality going on. This
Agreed.
building around, especially the first floor. I mean, the building is horizontal in nature overall, but there's a lot of vertical going on here, and I thought that that was appropriate with the vision of the glass.
Right, well, I think what Julia is saying is, did you give it any thought to leave it as exposed brick as it was, just to let it read?
Well, it doesn't.
Well, that
that's-
image doesn't really show it.
yeah.
There's no other brick around the rest of the building.
Right.
Yeah, it's only in this section right along here.
Right.
where that brick is.
Right, it's just that
Is it because of
it's
the
a
black?
level of interpretation. So,
Well, is it the black panels that exist right
That's
now are
gone.
divided into 3?
yeah.
You wanna show me that?
These are 3 panels here?
Correct, yeah, so there was a.
There are 3 panels?
Yeah.
Well, there
Okay,
was,
so,
they're gone now.
Yeah, but that's all.
oh, you
ripped
took
off.
them off,
We took
okay.
them off.
The brick wall is exposed
Yeah,
now.
what's behind it is just a brown brick wall.
Right, because we
Yeah.
saw that on the
Yeah.
walkthrough.
Yeah, I think they filled in those garage doors.
Yep.
So-
Yeah.
This is here, this is here.
Yep.
All these panels are existing. They're
Correct.
there.
Right,
This is here, this is what, when we take that box sign down, we've got glass here. And that's it, everything else is.
Can you talk to so you mentioned that the original sign bands, there's no terracotta, so you're proposing to drive it that and then use that as your sign band?
Yes,
So it's homogeneous?
yes.
it was that way. You can, on parts of the building, you can see
it-
that even though in this picture that doesn't exist, but if you walk down here, it was flat.
Yeah, I can read that. And then the last time we were here, we were discussing just where those awnings recessed in. Does this incorporate that change as well? So your last presentation, we were speaking of that gap between the window frame and the terracotta.
Right.
And so how have what solution is here? I'm sorry, I just got these, so I
We
didn't.
would do that with the drive it on the cement work
As a
panel
band.
also. And we would paint that dark color, which it originally was.
So it's visually it would interpret as that band there.
Band around the building.
Okay.
Which was there originally when they were the awning.
Correct. Okay.
No more metal, no more, I wanted to delete every piece of black metal on the building. I think it looks horrible. Take time ago.
It's all rotted.
Yeah, it just doesn't look good in my opinion.
But see, what happens here is these panels are the original terracotta panels.
Oh.
And we thought that it ran all the way down, but it doesn't. And that's the natural gap when the building was built, as is 2 here on this side. and
Right.
Same on the other side.
Right, so your new signs will go back in those historic
The original.
openings, quote
Right,
unquote.
now-
May not go on every panel, but it'll
You
probably just go on the
probably
appropriate.
can't, but that's something to be discussed in terms of how much signage can have, and that's not part of our discussion
Right.
today.
Right.
How much signage you
We're
have,
gonna
right.
go within the ordinance of the sign.
Understood.
But just to clarify, because we have 2 old pictures, the signage will go where it originally was, it will not interfere in the band that had the awnings.
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned about having too much signage. I think the place is gonna do well, so I'm not gonna fight to get every inch of the building signage. I don't think it'll be necessary. Just with the windows alone, I think people will be able to peek in and see,
Sure. Any board member have an issue with the material proposed on the building?
No, I still go back to where the brick was, and the only thing I'd ask, if you can see, I understand you're trying to bring the verticality down, But on the first floor, all the divisions are actually much narrower. So I would look to that as part of your rhythm, so that it doesn't match in terms of the width of this band that comes down.
Okay, we could do that.
Do you understand
Sure.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's an astute comment. Yeah.
I don't see it being a problem. I just, on a side note, I got an SBA loan for this, and I'm over it, so it's for me to open, it's very time sensitive.
Sure.
Any other comments? Don't need a motion, great. Comments? We're good.
Comment in the positive.
Thank
Great.
you.
Great project. Appreciate for your patience today.
Thank you.
And thank you for the tour, it made a difference.
Good luck.
Thank you. Yes. It's a great use. It's a great new use.
It's a terrific building.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Oh, I have problems with those two. If you want.
What is that? It's a what?
That's very fancy.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. Trippy.
Yeah.
It's the first one. Very good.
It's awesome.
No, that's good too.
So this is a major site plan review. It is major site plan review application 2423 for 411 University Avenue. This is new construction, 9-story, 47-unit residential building with basement parking. This is before the board because the development is located immediately across from Grace Church, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and is eligible for designation as a protected site. The role of the board is to determine if this project will have any impact on the historic character of the NR listed resource, and if so, to recommend mitigation measures for the Planning Commission.
It's just a recommendation.
It's recommendation. Yep.
Good morning. My name's Dave Mosier, Mosier Architects, 1035 7th North Street, Liverpool, Suite 1A. So I'm here with the client. The client's by text. But just to go through the project, to introduce you to the project, it will be sitting on two sites that we have applied for subdivision on 411 and 413. There's a 3-family and a 7-family units now, which are over 100 years that's come into structural disrepair. So the intent is to then combine the sites via the subdivision, provided a buildable site, developable site. This then develop a mixed-use facility that also has affordable housing component as well implemented with it. And it meets all the zone ordinance requirements for that zone, setbacks, coverage, parking requirement. And it would be 9 stories, which would include basement parking down below. And also it faces the connective corridor as well, which helps enhance, I think, give it more curb appeal because of all the work and effort that was put in place there. And with material that we're looking at proposing, is right now to the first story would be a limestone base stone that kind of recalls, let's call that industrial, when the buildings used to be built, a little bit more heavier duty material. Then we would introduce a modern element of a dark anodized brown, like basically eyebrow right around that. Then we would then use brick all the way up through. And then on the corner monolith, kind of recall some of the modern design features from the neighborhood in the area as well. So in essence, yes, it would house 47 units. And yeah, it's an exciting project.
I'd like to ask, have you conducted a shadow analysis or study or have any models of how the shadow would fall, particularly in relation to the church?
Not a shadow, but we do have a mass studies you see down below where they do show some shade and shadowing, but not how it relies onto the church.
Do you want me to bring it up a little bit more?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you point it out there in terms of your building relationship to the church so we can see it better?
Looking from the south, basically southeast, this is the proposed building right here. And Grace. And looking from the north and west, there's the proposed building here.
If I could just mention that Grace includes the Welsh Garden, which is directly across
space
from the new construction.
Which would be directly across from the building.
That's correct.
My comment is just scale. And I know it meets current zone, right? I think it's MX.
Yes.
Yeah. So to me, we're replacing two-story Italianate houses, two-story Italianate houses from, the 1870s, 1880s with a 9-story with at-grade parking or is basement parking?
Basement parking.
Basement parking.
How many spaces are in the basement? If I'm looking at it.
There's 6.
6.
Mm-hmm. And that meets all the zone ordinance requirements based on location, mixed use to transit, and bike parking also is included in there. So it's.
So I look at this. I look at the scale of the building in relation to the neighborhood. I understand we have new zoning overlay. It's quite evident of the neighboring buildings and what else is being developed along East Genesee Street corridor. But here it's a little more unique. We have Grace Episcopal across the street from the 1870s and the garden facilities. And I look at it and I understand, going up to get the rooms, the apartments, excuse me. But historically, did you look at any neighborhood context to give it scale or to give it a better relation to existing context?
Well, with the existing context, as you recall, there's also approved high-rises across the street that's getting ready to start construction that was approved next to the synagogue. And then there was also, to the west of Grace, was, I believe, a 7-story with a 2-story underground parking basement that was approved as well in that same neighborhood context that would really surround that whole Grace Church. So we did look at that based on future scale that is going to be there comparative to also the performa for the scale of this building.
That failed to come through, but it did go through the process. You're right.
Right, correct.
Right. So I immediately look at the apartment building next door that gives a scale. That was an interpretation of scale in the 10s or 20s, right? And they've kind of have the horizontal breaks on the building to kind of pull it down, even though it's a 4 or 5-story building. It doesn't feel so
slender, so tall.
So tall or monolithic.
And we are very amenable to providing those kind of horizontal relief breaks around
Right.
in
I
banding.
see that you did that on the grade on the first floor, and mentioning the limestone cladding, to give that feel and that sense. But maybe that goes, I don't want to design the building, but maybe that gets heightened.
It could be.
Or, there's
we're
some
very,
sort of just contextual scale to relate to what's around, particularly to the church. The church is 3 stories,
3 plus
3 a little better story at the peak, because the tower's not there. The tower's been reduced, but in relation.
Yes, you're talking about Grace.
Yes. Yeah. In relation to that, and then just as a pedestrian You know, we've got the bike lanes,
Mhm.
all this, the pedestrian scale is kind of what I'm looking at for context.
But we're not opposed to taking that limestone up 1 or 2 more stories to kind of bring it into that contextual, let's call it the visual pedestrian view, rather than they're not doing this like New York City as a new tourist does, you know.
I don't know if that's what
Or is that
you're
what
heading towards in terms of taking the limestone up or not. It's not reading at a pedestrian scale. The other thing is I have issue with the mass, a 9-story building. And the only way to really evaluate it is to look at it from the context from, you know, a pedestrian view, looking down the street, looking up the street, and its relationship to the context and the fabric around it. In addition to the fact that, you know, Nicole mentioned something about shadow study. If we looked at it from a perspective at eye level, we would understand you could do that in terms of the perspective.
And we can manipulate those models we can manipulate those models to be able to provide that.
I would like to see that. And also if one can consider in terms of, because I can't tell from here, do we have a site plan? No.
Yes, there's a site plan in the package.
In relationship to the other buildings on the
Oh, no.
street.
Okay.
Because I want to understand where the face of this building is in context to the context of what's existing. The building on the corner where it's striated and it's only 5 stories, it's set back on the property, and I can't tell from this, or I'm assuming from this, that your building actually sits proud of it. And I would comment that it would help with the scale of the building if it didn't violate that area, where it stepped back from the street level and kind of respected the datum that's established on the street.
I mean, is the average setback line a factor in the siting of the building? Or the average setback line, you know, I'm not sure the current
I don't know
zoning.
what the-
codes-
the
But
current-
in this
MX
MX is
zoning.
different.
You can bring it to the.
You can bring it to the property line, but I think we already have it set back.
If I'm looking at PH1, the photo key plan, where it's hard to read, but it does, you can contextualize it with the apartment on the
There has to
corner,
be enough transparency.
where you can see the lawn space and you don't get
A
that.
portico or a porch doesn't count for transparency. It's in Article 4.
We don't, I don't have that, or I can't. It goes, well,
Unless it's I mean, it's a drawing, it's not an actual, like,
I don't know if
illustrated
it's a
building.
shadow line, or, I mean,
I don't,
What zone district is it?
because along the street, if we saw it from a perspective view, we would see
I think
that.
it's MX. but I can-
Do
And
we-
right
do we-
now-
What zone district is this in?
Hold on,
it should be
We got to
listed.
get the setback.
Zoning district, MX4 urban core.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but it's hard, it's very small and hard to read.
Pull that,
The part of the parking garage where you enter is within 6 inches of the property line. Then the front face recesses back 4 feet, 4.5 feet.
I guess I would like to see it in relationship to the fabric, to each
Adjacent.
side, because I think those buildings are set back quite a way, and that will help in the understanding of the mass. I mean, if there's a way in architectural features so that, is 9 stories allowed in this urban?
8 stories is a maximum.
It's the maximum, but
One
it-
additional story is allowed if 75% of the off-street parking is located within the building. And I'll just point out that facades along the public realm and the MX4 district, this is on page 28 of rezone, Article 2, Section 2.10 or 2.10 MX4 urban core, for setbacks of the principal structure. Facades along the public realm will have 0 setback with allowance for transitional features as defined in the building edge in section 7.3. Alternatively, a build-to line may be established through a sketch plan consultation with the Planning Commission for projects with facades which present upon at least 50% of street frontage on the block. So if they're taking up 50% of the block, then a different conversation would happen, but they can go to the build-to line, but there has to be 50% of parking. No, that's for an extra story. So do you meet the, you're proposing 9 stories?
Correct, 9 stories.
And is 50% of the required parking?
Is in the basement.
Is it in the
All the
basement?
all the
Oh, right,
required-
yeah, I think I
Mhm.
remember this.
Mhm.
Yes, so, and
What is the rear yard setback?
I wanna
Your
believe
building
like
is,
7.5.
your building is filling the lot, correct? So you have 7.5 feet on the back?
Well,
Or 5.9.
okay. No, that's, then if it's 50% of the block, then, but this is not. But the salient thing here is facades along the public realm will have 0 setback with allowance for transitional features, which is what I think you're talking about, as defined in building edge, okay? Building edge is a term of art in the code, and it reads, the building edge includes the external wall of the principal building and transitional structures and areas, including but not limited to alcoves, street furniture, chairs or stairs, lawns, and landscaping, and other features outside of the public right-of-way, but within the public realm to a maximum depth of 25 feet from the property line. Traditional areas associated with a building edge shall not exceed 20% of the facade in any case. So they can build to the lot line. They can have these building edge features, but I don't believe that it's required that they do that. But what they do need to do, how wide is the building?
Gosh.
Because if it's too wide, then they have to break up the facade with, so that, in terms of the massing. I don't think that meets that threshold.
Of the board is nonetheless to consider the impact to historic resources, so, and the character.
And in my mind, that's why I want to see, I want to see the massing in the context of the street from, from the north, from the south, angles, because just looking at it, you have a key here in terms of where the photos were taken, but that's only in plan, so I'd like to see it. That would be my comment before making additional comments, because my concern is the mass of the building overpowering and even in putting in shadow the church and the garden piece. Okay. And if we can also see more detail in terms of how you're fenestrating the facade. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience. Yes, thank you for your patience.
That was a long one. But
Not over yet.
Not over yet. Pardon? Okay. Sure. And we're just commenting, correct? Okay. And this is also MX5? It is. Well, I don't have those memorized yet.
Get up and walk for a minute.
Okay.
Gotta go through all the interior pictures. Oh, you're at the bottom, you're at the end. There you go. Sure.
I can tell you a little bit about this. It is a major site plan review for 600 Montgomery Street, which is also known as 250 Harrison Street. It's an adaptive reuse of commercial residential. The building is eligible for the National Register. It's going to be converted from office and retail on the ground floor to a 35-unit mixed-use development. So the property is eligible for the National Register, and the new owners plan to apply for the historic rehabilitation tax credits. It is originally, it was built in 1928 as one of the early Hilton hotels. So it's going back to a residential, quasi-residential use, yeah. Of course, it was later converted into office space. The plans or the elevations they provided us don't give you a tremendous amount of detail, obviously. But one of the features that I noted, of particular notice, that they're going to be removing the solid pane tinted glass windows and plate glass windows and putting in windows that reflect the historic imagery of the hotel. So they're, I don't know that they're double hung, but they're sash windows with multiple panes in the upper sash.
Are there historical photos of, yeah, barely can see.
Yeah, there are actually some good ones, but they're not included in your packet, but there are some good ones. So if there's some additional information that you would like to ask of the applicant, who is not here, but I can ask the applicant.
Like, you know, what the windows are that they're coming back with. You know, yes, it's positive. Get rid of the plate glass mirrored finish, and come back, you know, with probably more residential type of configuration.
Yep.
Whether they're double hung or single or whatever. And it appears like they're also doing something on the top floor.
Yeah, there's a penthouse of some sort, so we need some details about that.
Guardrail and so forth.
And the ground floor, it's not really showing what the in detail what their plan is for the storefront or for signage. So we would need both of those as well. You would need both.
Right, and any lighting, you know, change in lighting that they might propose, because there is lighting on the building right now in terms of sconces, but it would be good to know what the intent is.
Reading through it, it said they weren't going to touch the eastern end, which is Allen Angus, but they were going to renovate the western end, just to tighten it up. But it wasn't too specific as to any exterior alteration.
And we would just need to know that.
Yeah, my comment on the windows, this picture, although pretty tough, it looks like they're 6/1s.
Yeah.
And they're showing 4/1.
4/1, yep. Yeah.
So
we just need to know more about
we need a little more window information. Cut. It's a huge positive that they're replicating the that center. You call it center mullion between the windows, and eradicating that plate glass, which completely changes the historic look of the building. So that's a huge major positive.
Absolutely.
On that renovation, but again, the lack of information for the storefronts, and
Storefronts, lighting.
And rooftop.
Yeah, I've got
And
lighting.
are they intending to do
rooftop.
any signage?
And signage. I have signage
What
too.
kind of signage?
Yep. And just so you know, this is in order to get the tax credits, they're actually seeking to expand what is now the Montgomery Street, Columbus Circle Historic District. So it's going to be including a large number of other property. So pretty soon, all of downtown is going to be on the National Register.
Including the Everson too, correct?
That is correct. That's correct. So, yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right,
Does anyone else have any more questions of Kate regarding this? If not,
No. You just need comment, correct, for this project?
I'm sorry, say that again?
It's just comment
It's
only,
just
correct?
comment, yeah, we
Okay.
need more information.
Yeah, so
Yep.
comment in the affirmative that we're looking for some more information.
Yep.
right, that was the comment.
Yeah,
so-
all right, I wasn't sure. I just making sure.
Okay.
Discussion? You have anything to discuss? It's after 11. Come on.
I think this is the longest meeting. Okay, a motion to,
Is there a motion to?
I'll motion to adjourn. Okay, thank you,
That's why I asked.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Everybody did their work, and it was appreciated, and hopefully Merida was pleased with our
Performer?
performance.
I hope I didn't confuse you at all.
No.
Not at all.
Thank you for reminding us of a few aspects. So.
Are we off?